The next part of the logic functions are the ifs functions. Now we are including plural conditions. So we will be covering sumifs, averagifs and countifs. The first question now asks us how many units of pencils were sold in the central region. Now if you try to make sense of this question, it's asking you to do a sum of the units sold column for pencils, which is our criteria number 1, were sold in the central region, our criteria number 2. So now we have two criterias. Let's try the sumifs function. You will select sumifs. The arguments for this function have changed again. So try to look at the arguments and make sense. Even if you forget how to apply a function, these arguments are surely going to help you. So now the first part is the sum range. The sum range is our units sold. We will select that, Ctrl Shift and the downward arrow key. Then you will press comma, and then it's asking us for criteria range 1. So the first criteria is pencils, which means the criteria range would be the items section for this. You will press comma and then select your criteria 1, which is pencil. You will select it from the range and then you press comma and move on to the next argument, which is criteria range 2. Now it's asking you for your second criteria range. Our second criteria was the central region, which means the range for this criteria is the region column. Select this, comma, select any cell which says central region and press F4, enter. Now you have the sum for this. If you have more conditions within this question, you can press comma and move on to the next argument, which would be criteria range 3, and then you have criteria range 4 and so on. So you can have a lot of criterias. The second part is asking you sum of units sold in the east region. So the range of our sum is the unit sold column, and the only criteria given to us is the east region. So for this question, we are only going to apply sum if and not sum ifs, because we just have one condition. So you will select your criteria range, this, then you will select your criteria east, then you will select your sum range, which is the unit sold column, and then you will press enter to get the answer. So it's important to notice how the sumif function has the range and criteria first and then the sum range, and the sumifs function has sum range first and then the criteria ranges and criteria. The last question for sumifs is the sum of the total revenue. So now our sum range is the total revenue column. For binders, this is our first condition. Binders is an item sold by Jones. Jones is our second condition or criteria, and Jones is a representative in east. The third criteria, which is the region. Let's perform this sumifs and then select the sum range, which is the total revenue column. Then select criteria 1, which is binders. So criteria range 1 would be item column, comma, then your criteria is binder, and then you will select criteria range 2. So your second criteria are the representatives. Select this column, then select your criteria, which is Jones. Find Jones over here. Then select criteria range 3. The third criteria is your region. So this would be the range, and then your criteria is east. Select this, close your brackets, enter. So now you have the sum of total revenue for binders sold by Jones in east. You had 3 conditions and now you have the sum so easily. Let's move on to averagifs. Averagifs is same as sumifs. So for the first question, it's asking you the average of units of binders sold in East. Now you will type in averagifs, and the first thing it's asking you is the average range, average of units. So you are again going to select units sold column. Then you will select your criteria range 1, which is binders. So your range would be the items and your criteria is the binder. And then your second criteria is the region, and your criteria itself is East. When you close your brackets, you will get the answer. So the arguments for this are the same as the sumifs function. The second question for averagifs asks you to find the average revenue for pencils. So now your average range is changing. Averagifs, and now this average range is going to be the total revenue, because you are trying to find the average of the revenue column. Then you will select your criteria range 1. Your criteria number 1 is pencils, so your range would be the items column, and your criteria is pencil. Then your criteria range 2 is Jardine, sold by Jardine, so she is supposed to be a representative. We will select this column and we will select Jardine. And the last criteria is the region, so we will select this column and comma and then the central region, and you will close the brackets, enter. Countifs works exactly in the same way as the previous two did. Now the question asks you count entries for representative Harvard in East. So you will write equals to countifs and then given criteria range 1. So the first criteria is the representatives. You will select the representative column and then you want Harvard. So our criteria is Harvard. We will select that, comma, the criteria range 2, that's East, which means the regions. So this will be our second criteria range and our criteria is East. Then you will just close your brackets and press enter to get the final answer. The last question asks you count entries of pen sets sold by Kibble in the central region. So you will type in countifs. As we just need to count the entries, now our criteria range 1 is, so you will select this range, the item column, and then you will select pen sets as your criteria. Your second criteria is sold by Kibble, who is a representative, so you will select the representatives column and then you will find Kibble, select him, comma, criteria range 3, which is the region, and our criteria itself is the central region. You will just close your brackets and enter, and now you have the entries for pen sets sold by Kibble in the central region.